You work hard, play by the rules, and treat others well. From childhood, we're taught that if you're a good person, good things will happen to you. This comforting idea that the world is fair and people get what they deserve is known as the just world fallacy. We like to believe karma is real, that virtue is rewarded and vice punished. It feels right. But then, real life rudely intervenes. You notice the school bully winning accolades, the backstabbing coworker getting promoted, or corrupt leaders thriving while honest people struggle. The world isn't a Disney movie where the pure of heart automatically win. In fact, it often seems like the opposite. The worst people, those with the fewest scruples, rise to the top. This stark contrast between what should happen and what does happen can shake our faith in any inherent justice. It's frustrating, even disheartening, to watch the cheaters and liars barrel past the kind and sincere. Why do the worst people succeed while the good folks get left behind? Are we naive to expect fairness? Before despair sets in, remember that great minds have wrestled with this paradox for ages. Even ancient philosophers noticed the disconnect between morality and success. Socrates pondered whether it is better to suffer injustice than to commit it, while his student Plato told the story of the Ring of Gyges, a tale suggesting that if a man could become invisible, free from consequences, his moral behavior might vanish too. In other words, remove accountability, and even good people might act like scoundrels if it gains them an advantage. This moral paradox is old. The illusion of fairness has long been a human coping mechanism, a way to make sense of why we should be good even when reality shows scoundrels prospering. So if you're feeling bitter seeing a ruthless person win, you're not alone. The universe, it turns out, didn't get the fairness memo. Friedrich Nietzsche, the 19th century philosopher, offers a provocative explanation for this phenomenon, one that shatters rosy illusions but offers a deeper insight into power, morality, and how we might still thrive without becoming terrible people ourselves. The paradox of ruthlessness. There's a reason we see ruthless people rise in every arena from playgrounds to parliaments. Nietzsche was brutally honest about it. Power is rarely given, it's taken. Those willing to seize power by any means often end up with it. Imagine a competition where one group plays fair, waits their turn, shares rewards, and another group cheats, grabs, and exploits every opportunity. Who's likely to come out on top? The cheaters, at least in the short run. In Nietzsche's view, and frankly, in evolutionary terms, moral restraints can act like shackles in a relentless struggle. Society is essentially a jungle of sorts. The law of the jungle favors whoever is bold or vicious enough to grab what they want. The kind-hearted may hesitate out of fairness or empathy, giving the ruthless a head start to snatch the prize. Modern psychology backs up this harsh truth. Studies have found that traits like low empathy and high egotism are disproportionately common among people in power. To put it bluntly, a lot of bosses and leaders show signs of the dark triad of personality: narcissism, Machiavellian cunning, and psychopathy. In fact, research suggests roughly 1 in 10 corporate leaders could be considered psychopathic, a rate many times higher than in the general population. Lacking a strong conscience or empathy can make it easier to make cutthroat decisions. If you're willing to fire half your staff, lie to clients, or manipulate anyone in your way, you can move fast and break things, as Silicon Valley likes to say, without losing sleep. The rest of us, weighed down by scruples and feelings, end up playing catch-up. It's an unsettling advantage. The very qualities that make someone terrible by normal standards can make them successful in a competitive arena. History is full of examples. Ruthless conquerors, corrupt politicians, and greedy tycoons often rocket to prominence. They leverage fear and deception effectively. Nietzsche wouldn't be shocked by this at all. He admired the ancient philosopher Heraclitus, who observed that war is the father of all and the king of all, and some he has made gods and some men, some he has made slaves and others free. In other words, conflict decides who rises and who falls. The strong-willed will often triumph over the timid. In the constant war of human competition, those who fight without restraint tend to win. Nietzsche, ever the realist, essentially nods along. Of course the bastards are winning. The game itself rewards their boldness. But before we conclude that all hope is lost and one must be evil to win, Nietzsche's philosophy needs a closer look. He doesn't simply say, bad guys win, deal with it. He digs into why good and bad even mean what they do, and how our moral framework might itself be part of the story. To understand why the worst thrive, Nietzsche asks us to reconsider what we call good in the first place. Master morality versus slave morality. Nietzsche's insight begins with a bold reevaluation of morality. He claimed that there are two fundamental types of moral outlook in human history: master morality and slave morality. These aren't insults. They're descriptions of how value systems arise depending on one's position in a power hierarchy. In master morality, the values of the strong or ruling class define what is good. Qualities like power, ambition, pride, and independence are praised. The aristocrats of ancient societies, for example, celebrated traits that affirmed their strength. If you were a person of influence, good was whatever enhanced your status: courage, wealth, dominance, winning. What was bad? Essentially, anything associated with weakness or subordination, cowardice, poverty, meekness. Master morality is self-affirming. It says, what is good is what I like, what benefits me, the powerful one. It stands, as Nietzsche put it, beyond good and evil, beyond the common rules, because it makes its own rules. On the flip side is slave morality, the value system born from the perspective of the weak, the oppressed, or the masses, the herd, as Nietzsche unflatteringly calls them. Slave morality flips the script. It labels the powerful and their traits as evil because those traits harm the weak, and elevates the traits of the downtrodden as good. So, virtues like kindness, humility, empathy, and fairness are championed. Why? Because those qualities help communities stick together and take care of each other in a world dominated by powerful aggressors. In slave morality, to be meek and selfless is good, and to be prideful or oppressive is evil. This morality emphasizes alleviating suffering and promoting equality, understandably, since it was developed as a response to suffering under tyrants. Nietzsche sometimes describes this in terms of resentment, the weak resenting the strong, and thus creating a moral framework that paints the strong as villains. If you can't beat the masters physically, you beat them with moral arguments, shaming strength as brutality and praising meekness as true virtue. So, what does this mean for our question of why the worst people succeed? Well, the very phrase, the worst people, is usually spoken from a slave morality perspective. It reflects the common, altruistic values we've been taught. When a ruthless person cheats or exploits and then succeeds, we call it unfair because by our moral system, slave morality values, that shouldn't happen. But Nietzsche flips our viewpoint. What if that ruthless person is operating under a different value system, some modern form of master morality? From their perspective, they're not evil. They're just asserting their natural right to win, unencumbered by rules meant for lesser folk. They see themselves as creators of values, not bound by herd morality. In their own story, they're the hero, not the villain. This is a scary thought. The worst people succeed because they don't accept that they're bad in the first place. They've rejected the shared moral norms that hold others back. They've opted out of the social agreement of fairness. Nietzsche doesn't necessarily endorse their cruelty, but he wants us to see the cold truth. Moral codes are human inventions, and they often serve the interests of those who create them. The powerful throughout history created moral systems that justified their power, master morality. And the powerless created ones that condemned the powerful, slave morality. Thus, what we call good or bad is tightly linked to who has the power. The worst people, in the common view, succeed because they play by the master morality playbook. They write their own rules and refuse to be limited by the values of the herd. They literally don't play fair, and that gives them an edge over those of us who do. Understanding this divide in moral perspective is eye-opening. It suggests that part of the reason ruthless individuals get ahead is that they're unbound by the collective moral consensus. They are, in a sense, operating on a different moral frequency, one that says, might is right. This brings us to Nietzsche's next key idea, one that underlies both of these moralities and indeed all human striving: the will to power. At the heart of Nietzsche's philosophy is a fundamental psychological principle he calls the will to power. Despite how it sounds, this concept isn't just about political power or bossing others around. It's much broader. The will to power is essentially the drive to assert oneself, to expand one's influence, to achieve mastery, and to overcome obstacles. Nietzsche saw this will as the primary driving force in life, more basic than the will to survive or the desire for pleasure. It's an urge to grow, dominate, and shape the world according to one's own vision. Every living thing, he thought, exhibits this drive in some form, from a plant spreading its roots toward water, to an artist striving to create a masterpiece, to a tyrant conquering nations. Life is, in Nietzsche's words, essentially a will to power. How does this relate to why the worst people succeed? Those ruthless winners we see are often embodiments of an unrestrained will to power. They have an intense drive to get what they want, and few qualms about how they get it. Their will to power isn't held in check by guilt or altruism. Imagine ambition dialed up to 11, with the usual guardrails, compassion, ethics, turned off. It's a formidable force. Such individuals relentlessly pursue their goals, be it money, status, or control. They will themselves into positions of power. In Nietzsche's terms, their strong will to power overrides other considerations. They're not hesitating, wondering if they deserve this or if it's fair to others. They simply take. Modern psychology might describe this in terms of extreme ambition or even clinical traits. Those high in narcissism and Machiavellianism, for example, often display an unbridled drive to dominate. They believe deeply in themselves, even to a delusional extent, and feel entitled to power. This propels them upward. We've all heard the phrase, "nice guys finish last." Nietzsche would smirk and say, that's because nice guys temper their will to power for the sake of others, whereas the not-so-nice guys let theirs run wild. The result? The latter group outcompetes the former in many arenas. It's important to note that Nietzsche's will to power isn't inherently evil. It's more like a natural force, which can be expressed in countless ways. A scientist's curiosity, an athlete's competitive fire, a philanthropist's urge to improve society. These can all be expressions of will to power too. But when we're asking why the worst people succeed, we're focusing on the destructive, domineering expression of that will. Nietzsche would argue that many of us underestimate just how powerful and prevalent this drive is. We cling to moral ideals and expect hard work and decency to be enough. But underneath, the game is rigged by raw will. Those who have it in spades and aren't afraid to use it often run circles around those who restrain themselves. So, Does this mean Nietzsche thinks we should all become ruthless sociopaths to get ahead? Not so fast. Nietzsche admired strength, yes, but strength can manifest in different forms. The will to power doesn't have to lead to exploitation. In fact, Nietzsche's vision of the highest human being wasn't a scheming tyrant at all, but a creator, a person of great self-mastery and vision. To see that, we need to distinguish between two very different paths one can take in expressing the will to power: the path of exploitation and the path of creation. Two paths to power: exploitation versus creation. Not all power is gained by pushing others down. Nietzsche would be the first to tell you that greatness does not equate to cruelty. Yes, he observed that many rise by exploitation, but he also held a deep respect for those who rise by creation, by elevating themselves and others through their contributions. These are two distinct expressions of the will to power, and understanding them offers a way out of the moral quagmire. Exploitation is the low-hanging fruit of the will to power. This is the route the worst people often take. Use any means necessary to dominate. Exploiters see life as zero-sum. For me to win, someone else must lose. If they have to lie, cheat, intimidate, or manipulate, so be it. This path can yield quick, dramatic successes. Fortunes built on fraud, empires built on conquest, personal gain at others' expense. We've all seen how this works. The politician who rises by spreading fear and misinformation, the business executive who boosts profits by underpaying workers and cutting ethical corners, even the social climber who gossips and undermines friends to get ahead. This predatory approach is an expression of will to power over others. It's about domination. Nietzsche recognized its effectiveness, but he also knew its limits. People who climb by exploitation often become trapped in constant conflict and paranoia. After all, if you live by the sword, you tend to die by it. Their victories, while real, can be shallow and short-lived. History is littered with tyrants who fell spectacularly, consumed by the same brutality they once wielded. As Nietzsche quipped elsewhere, "Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster." The exploitative path risks turning you into exactly the kind of worst person that even you yourself might eventually despise. Creation, on the other hand, is a higher expression of the will to power. This path is about mastery and contribution rather than domination. Instead of exerting power over others, you exert power over yourself, your own talents, your own sphere of influence, to bring something new into the world. Think of the great innovators, artists, and yes, ethical leaders. They succeed not by taking from others, but by building and giving. An inventor changes the world with a brilliant invention, gaining wealth and fame as byproducts. A genuine leader inspires a team to achieve something amazing, gaining loyal followers and respect along the way. A social reformer like Martin Luther King Jr., or an ancient sage like Socrates, whom Nietzsche had a love-hate relationship with, wielded influence through the power of their ideas and integrity, not through violence or deceit. This creative route is harder. It often requires patience, vision, and integrity. You might not skyrocket to the top overnight because you're not actively sabotaging others. You're busy honing your craft or nurturing a community. But the success that does come from creation is deeper and more resilient. It's the difference between stealing a treasure and forging one yourself. The thief has a sack of gold until someone steals it back or throws him in jail, while the creator of value builds a legacy that can last for generations. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, the overman or superperson, ties into this idea of creation. The Übermensch is often misunderstood as a kind of mythical tyrant, but in Nietzsche's vision, he's more like the ultimate creator. The Übermensch creates new values, and a new way of living to uplift humanity. That's a profoundly creative act, an expression of will to power, directed at self-overcoming and world-overcoming, not petty exploitation. Nietzsche admired figures, both real and fictional, who broke the mold and gave the world something new, people who were powerful and creative. In contrast, the exploitative power seeker is, in a way, uncreative. He's just taking what others have made or seizing positions others built. Nietzsche might even regard many of today's ruthless billionaires and politicians as somewhat mediocre. They're playing a common game of power, not inventing a new one. So, practically speaking, how do you succeed ethically without falling prey to exploitation? The answer is to choose the creative path of power. Embrace your ambition, your will to power, but aim it at mastering yourself and your craft, not at scheming to undermine others. This could mean channeling your competitive drive into being excellent at what you do, rather than merely elbowing others aside. It means viewing challenges as opportunities to grow stronger, rather than viewing people as pawns to be used. Ambition itself isn't bad. How you pursue it is what counts. You can be bold, confident, and even a little rebellious, qualities Nietzsche would applaud, while still acting with integrity. In fact, people who succeed through creativity and integrity often achieve a more enduring success. They gather genuine respect, loyal allies, and personal fulfillment. Meanwhile, those who succeed by treachery live in a fortress of lies, always fearing the inevitable reckoning. Yes, the world allows exploiters to win, often far too much. But that's not the only way to win. Nietzsche challenges us to rise above not just the meek herd, but also the vulgar class of tyrants. He invites us to become something greater than both, the master of oneself, a creator who doesn't need to stoop to cruelty, embodying the Übermensch, the power of self-mastery. Where does all this leave you? If you're disillusioned by the success of bad actors, Nietzsche's insights can actually be empowering. He has, in a sense, pulled back the curtain on how the game of power is played. No, the world isn't innately just. Yes, raw power often bulldozes decency. But within that truth lies a challenge: to cultivate your own will to power consciously and ethically. In Nietzsche's ideal, the goal is to become an Übermensch, not a tyrant or a monster, but a person who has mastered themselves and risen above the ordinary limits. This is someone who creates their own destiny and values, who doesn't rely on society's approval or play the victim. It's the ultimate form of empowerment. To embody this true Übermensch spirit, start with self-mastery. This means developing strength of character, discipline, and resilience. It's conquering the inner obstacles, your fears, insecurities, and weaknesses. Anyone can try to dominate others. Far more impressive is the person who can dominate themselves. As an ancient proverb says, better to conquer yourself than to win 1,000 battles. When you achieve self-mastery, you become untouchable in a profound way. You're no longer a slave to public opinion or fleeting rewards. You don't need to cut others down to feel tall. You grow from within. This inner strength radiates outward as confidence and purpose. With self-mastery in hand, direct your will to power toward creativity and excellence. Whatever your field or passion, pour yourself into it. Let your ambition drive you to excel and to innovate. Nietzsche believed in living dangerously, taking risks, embracing challenges, in the pursuit of becoming who you truly are. That might mean standing up for what you believe in at work, starting that project no one else dares to, or reinventing yourself at midlife. It's about carving your own path rather than exploiting the beaten path. Yes, it requires courage. You might not win the quickest rewards, and you will face resistance. But the satisfaction and authenticity you gain are incomparable. You're succeeding on your terms, not by someone else's script or by betraying your values. Crucially, shedding the illusion of fairness can make you stronger, not cynically bitter. Once you accept that the universe doesn't automatically reward the just, you stop waiting for external validation. You stop expecting that just because you're kind and hardworking, fate owes you anything. Instead, you take responsibility for creating meaning and success in your life. This is very much in line with Nietzsche's thinking. It's a kind of freedom, the freedom to not be naive. You can acknowledge the darkness in life and in yourself and still choose to shine your own light. In a sense, you become both realistic and optimistic. Realistic about how the world often works, but optimistic in your power to shape your world. The Übermensch embodies this balance. They are beyond good and evil, not because they are amoral, but because they have forged a personal morality that transcends conventional petty rules. They don't seek success by society's shallow standards alone, nor do they wallow in resentment at others' success. They're too busy creating, growing, and elevating. By striving to be that kind of person, you can succeed in life in a way that feels whole. You can have ambition without losing your soul. You can be kind and strong, principled and fearless. In Nietzschean terms, you become the master of your own fate. So the next time you see a worst person succeeding, don't let it tempt you into despair or into copying their worst traits. Instead, let it remind you of what not to do. Use it as motivation to double down on your own growth. Yes, the game of life can be dirty, but you can choose to play a different game altogether. One where you measure success, not just by the power you hold over others, but by the power you've cultivated within yourself and the positive impact you create. Nietzsche's ultimate message isn't to become like the ruthless victors he described, but to rise above the entire dichotomy of victim and victor, weak and strong, by becoming something more. In the end, why do the worst people succeed? Perhaps because they're playing by one set of rules. But you have the capacity to rewrite the rules of your own life. The illusions have been stripped away. You know the score. Now, armed with that knowledge, forge your own path to success, one that doesn't require leaving your conscience at the door. Empower yourself with a fierce will, guided by wisdom and creativity. That way, whether or not you reach the very top of some hierarchy, you'll have achieved something far more meaningful. You'll have become the hero of your own story, the master of your fate, and maybe, just maybe, one of those rare individuals who embodies the true Übermensch spirit in our world.